Okay, we're back, and we've been talking with Avi Lipkin about the Bible Bloc Party, which in Hebrew again is called
the Gush HaTanakhi.
HaTanakhi. And you were talking in the last segment about the Jewish people, that all of the remnant of Jewish people will return as predicted in Deuteronomy. Here's my question: I'm an American. I'm not Jewish. I'm sitting in my hometown, okay, and I hear this prediction from you, and then I look in Deuteronomy and I see it's true. You're saying it's coming in our lifetimes. What do I think about that? Is that a scenario where radical Islamic terrorists come in and just start targeting Jews specifically? Or are we all being targeted? Is it a massive revolution and upheaval of the entire nation in order for this prediction to come true?
It's both.
Okay, explain.
Okay. First, let me say one thing. The reason I've been speaking about this since the summer of 1999 was because when I was in Canada in the summer of 1999...
Wait, you mean you believed it since 1990?
Well,
but you've spoken about it since 99?
Right, since 1999. Okay. I was in an Orthodox Jewish synagogue and on the Sabbath, and there was a Christian woman who was attending the Orthodox Jewish synagogue because Jesus went to synagogue on Shabbat. He didn't go to church. He went to synagogue. And he wasn't a Southern Baptist. And anyway, so to make a very long story very short, she said that she works with the Canadian police and that they said that 90% of the Muslims in Canada are peacekeeping, law-abiding citizens. Only 10% are terrorists. And their job is that the Muslims of Edmonton have to kill the Jews of Edmonton and their Christian spouses. And the pastors and the people in the churches that are pro-Israel. And they have everything cataloged. The Muslims have everything cataloged. There's a plan. They know exactly whom to target first. Then the rest of the Christians will be targeted later. But the worst enemy of Islam is the Jew, followed by the Christians who smell of the Jews, meaning that they're married to the Jews, or they're Messianic, or they love Israel, or they love the Torah, and pastors that are pro-Israel. Now, again, today, if you speak, for example, against homosexuality, because the Bible says that they're against homosexuality, God is against homosexuality, you go to jail. I mean, you can't preach it. They ban the Bible. Now, the same thing, if Islam is coming to kill the Jews and you speak against Islam, just like with homosexuality, then you're also banned because you're not allowed to say it. And actually, I have to tell you, many people here in Israel, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, they said, give us all your Christian contacts. And I said, I really don't have so many Christian contacts because the Christian world is not really open to what I'm saying. It's small, remnant Christian groups that are not afraid to hear the message. And so indeed, there are a lot of people very important people in Israel who would like to have all my Christian contacts. I'm ready to give it to them, but they would be very, very disappointed. But the bottom line is that the Muslims of Edmonton kill the Jews and the Christians in Edmonton. The Muslims of Toronto kill the Jews and the Christians in Toronto. The Muslims in Vancouver kill the Jews and Christians in Vancouver. And the same in the U.S., the same in Latin America, where you have big Jewish communities, same in Europe. And all of this will happen when there's a major war in the Middle East. And we are expecting a major war in the Middle East because of Iran, Hezbollah, Gaza, Syria. We don't know where this is all going.
I see.
And America will be targeted because America, especially under Trump, is an ally of Israel. So why should America not be targeted?
So you're not, I mean, obviously it's not a prediction. You're trying to decipher how it could happen.
Correct.
Because it's predicted to happen.
Correct.
But the way you decipher it is not that there will be a new brand of anti-Semitism that will be so vile and so targeted on Jews, but rather it's war. The catalyst is war in another part of the world in which all Muslims rise up, are told to rise up and attack wherever they are. Is that
very correct? Very correct. And again, the United States, no matter what it does, whether it's pro-Israel or anti-Israel, America will always be seen as the great Christian Satan by Islam, and the only thing that could save America would be if America all became Muslim. And they have plans for that too. Yeah. So you have the radical Islam, which says America is the Christian Satan, has to be destroyed. And then you have the so-called moderate Muslims, which are moderate my foot, and their plan is to spread Islam by more peaceful means through immigration, through lawmaking, and hijrah. Hijrah is the immigration. And then basically, little by little, incrementally, bringing in Sharia law and banning constitution and banning the Judeo-Christian Western civilization.
You know, this idea that Islam could come back and or could come in a big way in the USA, for instance. Here's the I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about, well, here's a trend that could play into that. Number of people going to church is down. The fastest growing category among all religion is nothing. The nothings, the ones who believe nothing. But I say something has to replace that. I mean, it's not that you don't worship nothing. We're created to worship something, and so it seems like it could be that Islam is attractive just because of its simplicity and singular focus.
Well, Islam offers a regimen. It offers a discipline. And I don't know so much, forgive me for saying it, if all humans are created to worship something. I think all human beings at some stage are either anarchists or they want discipline. Mm-hmm. And Islam is a total in its discipline. And there are people, especially right-wing fanatics, who look in the direction of Islam. And then again, you also have the left-wing, I don't want to say the Democrats, but you have the left-wing people who oppose Trump and oppose Christianity. These are the useful idiots of Islam. And they might not necessarily believe in Islam, but they will be the useful idiots that serve the Islamic
agenda. Or at least
agenda.
won't oppose it, and will say, let them have what they're asking for.
Right.
It's a way to bring peace.
Right.
Well, that's interesting. Now, I want to go back to something you said earlier is fascinating. You said three things that Jews, in your opinion, do not want. The first one was the Messiah, and you said the reason for not wanting the Messiah was...
Well, the first thing is, how do you identify the Messiah? How do you know that it's not Jesus? How do you know that it's not Rabbi Schneerson? Or Shabtai Tzvi. There are a whole bunch of times in history where Jewish people arose and said, hey, I'm the Messiah. And there were great disappointments. And there were great persecutions of the Jews because of Jesus. In other words, I'm sure if Jesus were alive today, he would not be tolerating persecution of the Jews. But it was the non-Jewish Greeks who took over the church, anti-Semites who took over the church, and carried out the most heinous persecutions of the Jews. Every time Jews hear the word Messiah, they say, we don't want to hear about it.
By the way, that was also predicted, the fact that would happen. Paul said, wolves, after I leave, wolves will come into the church. They will draw people to themselves and lead the sheep astray.
Right.
Okay, so that's
the Messiah.
Okay, so that's the Messiah. Now, the second thing you said was they don't want the temple, and that was because...
Well, you see, we have 613 Torah commandments.
You said something about the legislation, because it would revoke 2,000 years of legislation, did you say?
Yes. In other words, the rabbis came forward over the last 2,000 years with all kinds of legislation to replace what was animal sacrifice at the temple. And indeed, 1/3 of our commandments, 613 commandments, roughly 1/3, deal with sacrifices at the temple. And if there's no temple, then what will happen to all these commandments God gave us? And so a lot of people, there's some people who want to build the temple, so we have to restore the 1/3 of the commandments that were abolished by the rabbis because there was no more temple. And then, of course, the third one, which is the one I'm dealing with especially, is the homecoming of Jews from all over the world, which God has predicted, and which we pray for 3 times a day, but nobody really wants.
Right. Do you have a position on the rebuilding of the temple? Will it come before the Moshiach comes or after?
First, let me say one thing. My faith is that there will be a third temple. It will be a house of prayer for all nations. And because I extend my Jewish mindset to include the Christians, I say Christians are Jews, but they're like a different branch or a slightly differing ideology. And you know what? Jews have different ideologies.
That's true.
Christians have many different ideologies, but we all come from the same God, the same Old Testament, and the Messiah is a Jew. So, like, I think there will have to be, and there will be, a third temple. I also have a whole teaching about what Christians call the Antichrist and the one world government imposing the temple on the Jews, and the Jews will go along with it. I don't think, however, that we should have animal sacrifices. I don't like the idea of animal sacrifices. In my opinion, animal sacrifices were a sublimation for the bloodlust of the child sacrifice. And so we see it first with Abraham, where God says, he is a ram, you don't have to sacrifice Isaac. And ever since, God has been constantly talking against us burning our children on the altar of Moloch. And it's one of the reasons why we see the children in Islam blowing themselves up as a form of Moloch worship.
Oh, I've never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
I've thought of maybe abortion, the killing of children
Also,
and so forth is like that. But I haven't thought of it in terms of the self-sacrifices to Moloch. I was thinking of Islam, but it's really well. You've also made the case that Islam is really harkens back to the moon god. That's not necessarily Moloch, but it's still one of those pagan deities. Right.
And
they
also
all have bloodlust,
and also certain behavioral patterns. For example, the Shias have something called the Ashura, where they hit themselves with metal.
Really?
Yes.
But because that's like the cutting and stuff that our kids do.
You're not supposed to cut yourself.
Yeah.
And if you remember the story, it's in 1 Kings chapter 19 about Elijah the prophet, and he was having a contest with 450 priests of Baal, and he took his cow, his sacrifice. They took their cow, their sacrifice, and their gods did not take their cow, meaning they're all going to get beheaded by Ahab. And God, of course, took the cow sacrifice of Elijah.
Yes.
And part of we see there is that these people were dancing, and they were cutting their foreheads
right
with knives
to try to bring down the evil spirits.
The pagan gods. So we see that today in Shiite Islam. It's called the Ashura ceremony, where they draw blood from their own bodies.
Do you think Shiite is more bloodthirsty than Sunni in general? Or
equal. They're both equal.
Yeah.
We say in Hebrew, zu nevela v'zu treifa. There are two types of animals which are not killed in the proper manner. One of them is an animal that is torn apart by another animal, and then there's another animal that dies of itself, of a sickness. And Jews are not allowed to eat either of the two animals. So in other words, the animal has to be healthy, without a blemish, and then it has to be slaughtered in the prescribed manner. And so that's why we say zu nevela, zu treifa. This one has not been slaughtered properly, or like an animal torn apart by a lion or a tiger. You can't eat the animal because it's been torn apart. And animals are just sick and just die by themselves. You don't eat the sick or dead animal either.
Well, we're sort of edging towards things like the temple, and which reminds me of the Tanakh. I had some questions I wanted to ask you about the Tanakh. Is there anything else you wanted to say about the party before we move in another segment, move into the...
Well, firstly, I have to say one thing. I've been preaching about this party since March of 1998, so it's more than 20 years. I hired the services of my lawyer, Caleb Myers, and his team 13 years ago. And I've raised over $55,000, which went directly to the lawyers. That's in addition to monies that I paid out of my own pocket for daily expenses. There's been a lot of bad blood between Jews and Christians in Europe for 2,000 years. If I've been preaching 20 years, that's 1% of that total time amount, 1%. Things have worked out in such a way that at latest, Israel's elections are called for November, meaning another 12 months. I cannot promise that our party will get in the next election. If God wants it, we'll be in. But to get elected in Israel, you need 150,000 votes, which is the threshold. If you don't get 150,000, if you get 149,000, you don't get into the Knesset. So we have to look at our potential voters. And I say the potential voters are going to come out of the 100,000 Arabic speakers, half of which are communists, who won't vote for my party out of anti-religious fervor. We have 300,000 Russians and Ukrainians and Ethiopians. I believe we can get a lot of their votes, but again, how much can we do in 12 months? Now, today, the first day of Hanukkah, or the eve of Hanukkah, they announced that the police have announced plans to recommend to the Attorney General to prosecute Bibi Netanyahu and Sarah Netanyahu on corruption. So elections could be brought up to March or May. Now, if I don't get the 150,000 votes, then it doesn't mean we're out of the game. It means we continue teaching. My job is to teach. My job is to go to churches, synagogues, civic groups, private meetings, radio and TV, and to convince people little by little of an ideology. And the ideology is an ideology of love, is an ideology of fellowship between Jews and Christians, alliance, strategic alliance to defend Israel from the enemies of God, which are the non-Judeo-Christians, and to defend Western civilization and democracy. And this is something we don't have today. And Christians, of course, have no representation in the Knesset today.
After this meeting in December 2018, your first official party meeting, does that restrict you in any way from any future activities? In anything you can't do?
My only restriction would come if I get elected to the Knesset.
Oh.
Because if I get elected to the Knesset, then I draw a salary from the Knesset, which is the Israeli government. Mm-hmm. And actually, I'd probably have to give up my American citizenship.
Wow, that is big. But before that, can you continue to fundraise in America?
Fundraising ends with the meeting next Monday.
It does. So
yeah.
This is.
Yeah.
big.
From now on, we raise our money in two ways. Of course, contributions up to $3,000 or 11,000 shekels per Israeli citizen a year, and membership fees. So if we choose 40 shekels, which is like $10, but if we have 100,000, people signing up, then that's $1 million. So we'll have to see how things develop. We are going to be a very low-budget party. We don't have money for advertising, so our work will be through the internet and home meetings.
So after Monday, you could go to America, but you can't fundraise.
I can go to America, I can give lectures, I can be paid for the lectures, I can sell my books and my products, but then I just have to pay taxes in the U.S. and Israel, as I've done for the last 20 years.
Okay.
But contributions to the party from abroad end next week.
I see. All right. Well, when we come back, let's talk about some of the.
I have a biblical subject I want to talk about.
That's right. And by the way, let me say on camera, wish you the best. This is a big turning. I didn't realize how big of a turning point was this meeting in a week. Yeah. And maybe by the time this is out, for many people, it will have already happened. But this is a big milestone. It has been a long time. But one of the things that I hear is that, and when I read the scriptures, that we have to understand the faithfulness of God, and there's no way that we can learn of His faithfulness without it taking a long time. You've been working at this. You've prayed for this. Many people have prayed with you on this, and it is finally coming to this big milestone. So
yes, well, it is basically Sisyphic effort. Sisyphic means always, never ending.
Okay.
And pilgrim's progress,
Yes.
So you take everything step by step, day by day.
Okay, well, we'll come back in another segment and continue to talk.